We now shift into Module 2 where we look at study design. And so we've seen a little bit of this already, but remember that at the beginning, before we even, work with patients or work with individuals in our study, in our context, we need to do certain things to make sure that we are statistically sound later on. And so the very first thing that we should do is define our population. And you might remember that the population is this giant blob here. I'm just going to put it in blue here. But this is a group of individuals that we're interested in knowing more about. And this is the largest possible such group, too. Okay? But oftentimes we can't directly get at this population. So what we end up doing is from this population, we choose a little tiny group, well, maybe not all that tiny in some cases, that we call a sample. Okay, and then this sample ideally is representative of the population so that what we can ultimately do, as is the ultimate goal of statistics, is to use something about the sample to generalize to the population. Okay, this is the goal. Okay, we want to use a sample to say something about the population as a whole. Okay, but the process right now that we're worried about is taking these different elements of the population and using them to effectively get our sample. Okay, and this is the concept of sampling design. Okay, or designing a sample if you want to think about it in using different language. Okay, but figuring out how to best pull people from the population into the sample that we in a reasonable way. Okay, so that's kind of what chapter 6 is on, is this sampling design. Okay, and then as we look at a study overall, we then, once we have a sample, then we have to figure out what to do with them, and that's where the idea of, so we have this sample, okay, and we need to either do an observational, actually I'm just going to draw it like this. We take the sample and we go one of two routes. We go into an observational study, or just plain and simple an observation, or we go into an experiment. Okay, and this is more of where we're going with chapter 7. Okay, so we're going to discuss both chapter 6 and chapter 7 in this kind of piece of the module, and focus in only on the highlights, okay? Because when you get into it, it's a little bit more nuanced, and it's going to depend based on your context. So we'll save that for later on, but ultimately, no, even though we're working on the sampling design right now, we still have this ultimate goal of taking the sample and saying something meaningful with the sample about the population.